The sun slowly set behind the concrete buildings, bathing the street in golden light. In this urban district where the facades of the buildings had long lost their original shine, an old man was walking slowly. Samuel, 72, a black man with snow-white hair and deep wrinkles that marked his face, walked forward leaning on a cane. Passers-by generally ignored him, absorbed in their daily concerns. But Samuel was no longer offended. He had seen too many things in his life, too much pain and silence, to let himself be disturbed by indifferent looks. His steps led him towards the small park where he came every day. This park was one of the few places he considered a haven, a place where he could remember without feeling alone. It was there that he thought of his brothers in arms, of the Vietnam War, of his fallen comrades. Samuel had survived hardships many would never have imagined, but it wasn't the war that haunts him most today. No, what was eating away at him was the silence, that of the generations who no longer understood, or no longer wanted to understand, what the elders had gone through. What hurt him was the indifference. That evening, as he sat on his favorite bench, a group of young men arrived loudly, filling the air with their loud voices. They had gathered together after school, like every evening, to hang out, to disturb, to live without looking around them. Bursts of laughter mixed with noisy discussions, but it all seemed a simple distraction, a void that many sought to fill with noise and thoughtless gestures. Samuel heard them, but he did not see them. For years, he had gotten used to ignoring the young people who hung around, some looking for trouble, others just a place to kill time. He no longer had patience for anger, provocations, or outbursts. The world seemed to need to vent, but he had learned to retreat into the peace of his mind, where he could still find some comfort. He let himself drift into his memory, his gaze wandering beyond the horizon, where the trees quivered in the light breeze. His thoughts drifted into the past, where the wind of war had blown stronger than any storm. There, in the heat of the jungles of Vietnam, he had learned what it was like to survive the worst ordeals. He had survived hell, but here, in this moment, he was content to live. Then, the group moved closer, shattering the peace of his mind. One of them, a man with an imposing build and a hard face, broke away from the group. His name was Malik, and the whole neighborhood knew his explosive temper. From a distance, he had a piercing look, a look that spoke volumes about his rebellion against everything that seemed unfair or frustrating to him. But what no one knew was that deep down, Malik was a lost young man, looking for validation, trying to find a place for himself in a world that never seemed to offer him a chance. That evening, the idea of challenging an old man sitting alone had arisen in his mind as a way to test his courage, to show his friends that he was him, the one who could not be disturbed without consequence. Malik approached Samuel with a smirk. He leaned forward, staring at the man as if searching for weakness, as if trying to understand what caused a man so old to remain so calm, to not react to the hustle and bustle of the world. "So, old man, you come here every day to watch the pigeons? Is that your thing?" he said in a mocking tone. His words were loaded with an insult disguised as a question. He crouched in front of the bench, his eyes glinting with an arrogance he believed he deserved. Samuel, impassive, did not answer. His gaze remained fixed straight ahead, as if he were no longer there, in this noisy street. He knew that sometimes ignorance was enough to calm young people seeking validation. But Malik, however, did not want to be ignored. He couldn't bear the idea that a man could escape from him like that an old man would remain so calm while he himself was boiling with frustration and inner anger.
"Do you hear me or not, you old man?"
Malik insisted, raising his voice, moving closer and closer to Samuel, until a palpable tension emanated from the air between them. The crowd was moving away, but no one dared to intervene. There was something threatening in Malik's attitude, something almost contagious that chilled the atmosphere. The old man slowly looked up, his dark, deep pupils fixing on Malik. He didn't need to speak to make the tension felt. His eyes, although tired by the years, shone with a quiet wisdom, as if they had seen beyond this paltry moment. Malik, however, did not understand. He only saw the appearance, the age, the stillness. Little did he know, that look bore the scars of a war he could never understand. Suddenly, without warning, Malik threw a violent slap at Samuel, who fell backwards onto the bench, the force of the blow knocking him off balance for an instant. The sound of the slap echoed in the air, and a heavy silence fell over the group of young people. Malik burst out laughing, thinking he had the upper hand, thinking he had put the man in his place. He approached Samuel, looking triumphant, and pushed him violently, as if to complete his show. "I'm going to make you understand who's the boss here," Malik shouted, his voice bursting through the air. He felt powerful, invincible, as if he had just won a battle, without suspecting the storm that would soon be unleashed within him. Passers-by were there, but no one intervened. Some watched furtively, their eyes turning away at each outburst of voice. Others walked faster, as if the scene did not concern them. Too scared by the violence unfolding before their eyes, too eager to reach their destinations, too indifferent to the pain of a stranger. Everyone seemed locked in their own bubble, as if the aggression playing out there was just a spectacle to be ignored. Samuel, lying on the bench, had felt this indifference with an almost painful acuteness. He had seen this world, these people before, in the same way, the same passers-by too busy, too preoccupied with their own world to care about the humiliation he was experiencing. However, against all expectations, the attack did not have the effect Malik had hoped for. Despite the violence of the slap, despite the humiliation, Samuel remained unmoved. His face remained calm, implacable, as if the violence he had just received did not have the strength to reach him. He was a man who, in his long life, had seen much worse than this impulsive gesture of a young man. He knew that this attack was only intended to satisfy a need to assert domination over something fragile, but Samuel did not fit into this dynamic. He was far from these power games, far from this world of violence and rivalries. For him, it was just an ego attack, a revolt of a young man against a world he didn't understand. But what Malik didn't know was that this humiliation would soon backfire on him in ways he never imagined. Another young person in the group, a more discreet boy, observed the scene from another angle. His eyes fixed on Samuel. He hadn't yet decided to leave the place, but something in the old man's posture caught his attention. It was not simply the calm of the man, but also something deeper, a quiet and powerful wisdom, a certainty of those who have gone through trials far more terrible than the small daily violences. He walked away in silence, but before disappearing into the shadows of the park, he turned one last time to Malik and said, almost regretfully, "You know, it's not a good idea to attack a man like that." The other young people followed him without a word, but this remark left a palpable uneasiness behind it. They didn't know what to do. They had seen the dignity of Samuel, but they did not have the courage to rebel against Malik. Some gave Malik uncertain looks, but he remained frozen, like a predator trapped in his own arrogance. Samuel, for his part, remained silent. He stood up slowly, each movement measured, aware of the fragility of his body worn by time and hardship. He knew he didn't need more. The old man did not intend to make another move. But Malik, who thought he had gained the upper hand, would soon discover that true power was not in brute force.
I'm a Vietnam vet.
Do you think you can scare me with that?
Samuel's words hit Malik like a bolt from the blue.
He stopped short, stunned. A heavy silence settled between the two men. Malik, panicked, searched for an answer, but found none. Samuel, this man he had taken for an easy victim, was not at all what he seemed. He had survived wars, battles far more terrible than those he could have imagined in his worst nightmares. Samuel stared at him, his eyes piercing Malik's mask of misplaced pride.
You want to know why I stay calm?
Because I've seen hell. I've been through war. And you don't even have any idea what it's like to really fight for your life. He slowly approached Malik, his gaze never leaving hers. There was no anger or hatred in his eyes, just a quiet strength, an absolute dignity. You want to hit me, but you don't even have a clue what that really means. Malik, trapped by his own words and his own ego, suddenly felt vulnerable. The violence he had used was nothing more than a sterile weapon, a weapon that had turned against him, leaving him naked in the face of a man he had underestimated. He looked for excuses, justifications, but his words were lost in shame. Nothing he could say could fix what he had just done. Samuel didn't move, he waited. Then, with one last look of disdain, he quietly walked away. He had nothing left to prove. He left Malik facing his demons, facing the reality he had just glimpsed. True power does not lie in strength, but in the ability to remain upright, with dignity, despite everything. The sound of Samuel's footsteps slowly died away in the night, and Malik, now alone, felt smaller than ever. He stood there, frozen, contemplating the shame that invaded him. What he had sought to impose by force had not been a sign of domination, but the beginning of his own humility. That evening, Malik thought hard. The violence that seemed so easy to him had left an indelible mark. He understood that true power lay not in fists, but in resilience, dignity and wisdom in the face of adversity. He also understood that the old man, erased from appearance, carried within him a legacy of suffering, struggles and survival, much heavier than he thought. And for the first time, Malik felt the weight of his own ignorance.